Hello! Today I'll be reading the story of Taro, who is one of my characters. Before we begin, here's what Taro looks like, and what Koru looks like. Taro's designer will be linked in the description. Growing up Keolian in Tamar was difficult, to say the least. Carrying the blood of the nation that waged war with Tamar, praying to the gods Tamar so hated and forbade, Taro was keenly aware of how others perceived him. While he kept his heritage and his beliefs a secret, he held fast to what he knew to be true and always kept his head high. Samora, his little brother, walked behind him, casting furtive glances around. "We should get home," he murmured. Taro said nothing, even when a gaggle of kids from the village scrambled across their paths. Look, it's the moon kissers! Tisu, Tisu!" sneered Besnik, the head of their little group. Taro ignored him, trudging onwards, while Samora ducked behind Taro. "You gonna bring your Keolian friends to burn our country? 'Cause we'll slay them all!" That sent out a chorus of snickers from the gathering crowd, who were creeping closer and closer to the two of them. Taro flattened his ears. It wouldn't make any difference if he told them the sacrifice his mother had made in defecting from Rhea Keoli to Tamar. It didn't matter either that his father was a bred and born Tamarese. They would never accept his family, and he'd made peace with the fact. If only they hadn't found out so quickly. Taro was only starting to get settled in, but soon they would move again. It was inevitable. Nowhere welcomed them for long, and he doubted he would ever find a place where he truly belonged. "What's this?" one of the girls chorused, tugging at a bracelet that Samora wore on his tail. "A little trinket to your gods? Are you gonna throw it in the river after you drown someone for them?" Samora whimpered and tried to slink away, but she pulled tighter, eventually slicking out claws to scratch him. Samora let out a yip as the bracelet broke free under her claws, nicking his tail. Taro turned around, letting out a snarl. His fur bushed up and his tail lashed. Some of the posse flinched away. "Leave us alone," he growled. "We've done nothing to you. We just need to get home." He locked eyes with the girl, who guiltily looked away. "You want to fight? See the full force of Tamari's might?" jeered Besnik, brandishing his fangs. "I do not want to fight. Please, we just need to get home." Taro shoved past him, Samora scurrying behind, as the giggles and cruel eyes followed them to the place they pretended was home. The day the officers came to his door, Taro kept his face calm despite the pounding of his heart. Had one of them broken the law? Been seen where they weren't allowed, eaten food they shouldn't have had, said a bad word about the president? Had the government simply tired of them? He stifled the urge to close the door and run, say goodbye to his family before one of them was taken away forever. He needn't have worried about that. He had been drafted into the military. Taro wasn't surprised. He knew this was coming ever since he'd turned 18. Still, he couldn't help his startled intake of breath or the way he collapsed, trembling into his mother's arms once they left. "He'll be all right," she murmured, but they both knew it wasn't true. "They'll find a way through this." But would he? How could he hold tight to his vow of pacifism if he was sent to the front lines? How could he use his claws to enforce the very laws that kept him in change? How could he do it all, while keeping his family safe? Who would protect Samora when he was gone? How would they get food on those hungry winter nights? But serving was mandatory, and refusal or desertion led to imprisonment, or worse. And besides, at least this way he had a steady paycheck. So he folded up the ticket they'd given him and packed his things. He said goodbye to his mother, to his father, to his brother. He left the next morning with nothing but a small satchel and his future in chains. He met Koru in battlefront training. So far, their days consisted of very little fighting, but the thought of battle still sat heavy in his stomach. His mom had always told him that war achieved nothing but death, and he believed in non-violence just as she did. At the very least, though, he was glad he wasn't chosen to be an enforcement officer, upholding the strict rules of the government, being the teeth that made people keep their heads low and their bodies busy. He avoided Koru at first. Koru was a noble, someone who could have gotten out of the draft, yet for some unfathomable reason he chose to come here, to face the elements and fight because he was proud to defend his country. He'd even managed to get out a few months early. Taro couldn't understand him. But even as he avoided Koru, he watched. He watched Koru struggle through the drills, determination on his face. He watched Koru acclimate to the conditions of the camp, all the filth and stale food and cramped tents that must have been so unlike his old pampered life. And he watched as Koru talked and laughed and listened, open-eared, as the others let out their vents and frustrations. He watched how Koru always had an uplifting word, an optimistic hope for the future. Foolish, perhaps, but welcome. Maybe Taro didn't understand him, maybe even hated his ignorance, but he had to admit that he wasn't what Taro thought a noble would be. So when Koru came and sat beside Taro on a chilly night, far away from the fire where the others gathered, Taro found he didn't mind. "It's nice tonight." Taro didn't say anything. Koru shuffled slightly. We got a fresh shipment of food, so that's neat." Still, Taro didn't speak. Koru glanced at him with bright amber eyes. They reflected the flickering flames. Is everything alright? You never talk with anyone, and they all seem to think you're a jerk, but you don't seem too bad." Taro snorted. "I don't seem too bad." Koru looked down at his paws. No, you seem nice. I was just wondering if there was something I could help with. Because I know it's hard to be out here and tiring, and the food sometimes sucks, and it's nothing like I was expecting it to be. Of course it's not. Koru's ears perked up. "What?" Taro glanced around, but the blue shadows enveloped them, and the orange blaze was far away. "Tell me, why are you here? Your family is rich enough that you could have skipped the draft." Koru's eyes widened. "Because I want to defend Tamar, of course. I don't want those bloodthirsty Kialians raising our lands." Something nipped at Taro, like a thorn digging into his fur, but he didn't know why. He is well used to the Kialian hatred by now. It wasn't any different coming from Koru. "And what are you protecting?" "Our people, our nation, democracy itself. They would tear it all down, make us worship their gods, forbid us from choosing our own leaders. Our very freedom would be stripped from us," he stuttered, outrage in his voice. Taro kept a careful eye on the camp, but so far no one had reacted as if they heard the two of them. "Really? That's what you think?" Taro flicked his tail. "You're luckier than most." Koru gave him a strange look. "I know, we're rich, and we have a big house, and we're friends with the president." Taro shook his head. "No, I don't think you understand. You know why I'm not happy here?" Koru opened his mouth, but Taro went on. "Because it's not any different than my life before, only now I'm fighting to keep my family hungry and tired and scared. I'm fighting for a president and a nation who never gave us a place to feel at home and only used our bodies to prop up their regime. You don't understand. They tell us, don't steal, but then they don't let us have enough food. They say, don't speak out, and then kidnap our friends. They say, don't disobey, and then they send us out to die." He snapped his mouth shut. He'd said too much. Why had he blathered on like an idiot? He knew he couldn't trust Koru. He would just report him to the authorities, and they would come for Taro, and his family would be left without him. Koru didn't say anything at first, and Taro followed his gaze to the glimmering stars above. "I don't know," Koru whispered. "I don't know anymore. But maybe you can teach me." Warmth budded in Taro's chest, and he glanced at Koru in surprise. Perhaps there was something there. Maybe. Koru smiled. They sat in comfortable silence, and the tension in Taro eased. Wildflowers clustered around their feet, the dandelions reaching out in hope. Months passed, uneventful save for the few battles that Taro avoided firing in. Not that it was easy. It was grueling and painful and exhausting. But the whole time, there was Koru. Koru, with his bright eyes that never dimmed, with his smile that always flashed, even through the days of trekking in miserable weather. They talked when they walked, when they rested, when they trained. Koru told him of his family, his parents who held him to a high standard, his mansion with velvet pillows and crystal chandeliers, his love and devotion to Tamar, and his desire to protect it. Yet, as he spoke, Taro noticed his eyes dart to their stale rations and grimy camp, and he didn't miss the flash of disappointment in Koru's eyes. Hesitantly, Taro began to share stories of his own. He started with the happy stories, the time his brother gave him a shiny purple rock, or how his mother made him a special soup when he was ill. Slowly, he began to tell the harsher ones. How his family was constantly on the move because nowhere they lived were they ever welcomed. How he had to sneak out after curfew because they would run out of firewood or food or water when their rations didn't last. How they had to watch their every move, everything they said, because if they didn't, if someone saw or heard, they would vanish without a trace. And, miraculously, Koru listened. Taro could tell it was hard for him at first to believe. But he listened, he tried, and slowly, he understood. Taro wasn't dumb. He saw the way Koru acted around him, the way he lit up whenever Taro came by, and he knew that nothing could happen between them because they were in the military, on the battlefield, and it would never be allowed. But he couldn't help the way Koru's words and wide eyes warmed him like nothing else could, the way Koru gave him hope that maybe a bright future was possible. And, late at night, when it was just Taro and the hums of the darkness outside, he let himself dream. Taro was telling another story when Koru asked the question he'd been trying to avoid. Why did your family always move so much? I was hoping you'd tell me on your own, but... Taro looked away. He knew it was inevitable, like everything else in his life. And really, it had been a long time coming. But still, it felt too soon. With Koru, he felt hope, stupid hope. That there was someone who understood him, someone who cared for him and saw him as he was. That was over now. Why had he let himself dream? Part of him wanted to lie, but he knew Koru would find out eventually. He deserved the truth. Do you really want to know? He asked. Koru nodded. Before I begin, the government is fully aware of this, so don't feel the need to report me. Koru inhaled sharply, but his eyes remained trusting. So Taro told him how his mother grew up in Rhea Kiali, part of a pacifist sect. How she'd been forced to fight in the Kialian army, only to defect to Tamar, giving them information in exchange for asylum. There, she found Taro's dad, a Tamarese man who practiced the Kialian religion, whom she married and had kids with. He told Koru how, while they tried to keep their identity secret, people always found out, and they would be shunned. Koru was silent, but his gaze never faltered. Taro finished his story and waited for Koru to say something. When he didn't, Taro said, I know you don't want to talk with me anymore, and you hate me, and I don't hate you. That caught Taro off guard. What? I don't hate you, Koru repeated. Taro blinked. Did you hear what I just said? I'm half Kialian. I know, but it doesn't change who you are. He took a stuttering inhale. You're Taro. You're kind and brave and wise, and I love you, Taro. I do. Being Kialian doesn't change that. Taro didn't know what to say. His mind turned. Of all the ways this could have gone, he never expected this. Like a fool he stood there, Koru looking at him with hope on his face, before he blurted, I love you too, Koru. I love you. He smiled and chuckled shakily. Koru beamed and knocked him over in a hug. They fell into a blanket of daisies, their laughs echoing into the golden sun. Little things. It was the little things that made it bearable. The honeysuckle scent of Koru's fur as he nuzzled Taro, somehow still sweet despite the stench of mud and ash. The blanket he made for Taro while he was visiting his family. His smile, which was more beautiful than the crown of onyx. When his bones were weary from traveling, when disease swept the camp and left him weak in bed, when the blood of friends and enemies alike coated his fur, these were the things that kept him going. He did everything he could outside of outright desertion to avoid fighting. He helped the medics, he brought supplies, he rallied messages. He was beaten sometimes when he disobeyed orders, but he was careful. Not for his own sake. He could take whatever punishment was doled out. He was careful for his family. And now, he was careful for Koru. It was difficult. The waiting, the fighting, the aching. But he had Koru, and that was enough. What if we ran away together? The afternoon sunlight warmed Taro's pelt as he lay next to Koru, away from their camp and the prying eyes in the embrace of the sheltered glade. The birds wove a hymn above the crowns of the trees. Dandelions drank the rays of the sun. Taro shook his head. We can't. They'd find us. He trailed off. They both knew what would happen if they were caught. And even if they didn't, we both have families. Maybe yours would be safe, but mine? Despite everything my mother has done to prove her loyalty, they don't trust us. I don't think they ever will. I can't run away. I can't do that to them. But what if we could? Taro looked at Koru and saw that familiar sparkle in his eyes. What if we found a way? You only have your 2 parents and your brother, right? We could find them, and we could all run away together. His tail was wagging slightly, and Taro couldn't help but smile, even though he knew it was futile. Where would we even go? Doesn't matter. Hyali, Namika, anywhere. The world is ours, Taro. He licked Taro's nose. We'll be free. We'll build a home for ourselves where we're safe and can choose our own life, where we don't have to worry about every little thing we do, where we can be who we want to be and love who we want to love and live our lives as we desire. I know it's possible. I know we can do it. Taro looked at the cerulean sky above. Could they really? Surely the military would find them. They always did. They controlled everything. But there were cracks, places where the president didn't quite grasp, holes to slip through. And if they made it out of Tamar, who could stop them? I would love that, Taro murmured. Koru grinned. Will you come with me? If I leave, if I find some place where we can build a home, will you be by my side? Taro put his head against Koru's. Yes, of course I will. I will follow you wherever you want to go. I will help you build a home for us. We'll make it out of this together. I swear it. We'll make it work. We'll be happy and peaceful and safe. I promise you, no matter where you go, no matter what happens, I will always be with you. It wasn't enough. He should have been more careful. The battle was almost over. What else could he have done? He did his best. But his best didn't matter. A stray bullet, and his best wasn't enough. At least this way, his family would be honored for his death. Searing pain and blood-soaked daisies welcomed him. He knew a medic wouldn't help him. Already, the stars chimed his name. He only hoped. Koru held him, gentle tears dripping onto Taro's uniform. No, he sobbed, pushing his nose into Taro's fur. Koru's warmth filled him where his own was slipping away. You promised! You promised that we would both survive. You promised we would make our own life, together. It's not supposed to go like this. It's okay, Koru. You can still do that. Please, he rasped. Survive the army. Escape, even. You have to make it through. And when it's over, build your own life. Find happiness. I know you can do it. Taro lifted his head and licked Koru before collapsing back down. Shadows and moonlight tickled at his face. Find somewhere you can be happy, where you can be safe, where you can be free. There was the sizzle of gunfire, the bark of commands, the cough of smoke. And there, too, was the honey scent of fur, the caress of sunlight, the dance of dandelions. Koru might have said something more. All Taro knew was his warm embrace. All Taro knew was that he was loved. Despite everything, he was loved. And here, he was home. Thank you so much for watching. This was pretty experimental and I rewrote the script multiple times before I was satisfied. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more. Even though he's not a major character, I still love Taro and he's very important to me. And there's still a lot I wasn't able to explore here. I may make Koru's side eventually, but I can't promise it'll be anytime soon. Thanks for watching. Bye!